Hello, my name is Nicholas Silvera, and I will be speaking about liability issues in disasters. To preface, I want to begin by saying that liability in disasters can be discussed for not just 3 minutes, but 3 weeks or months. I have therefore chosen to cover the basics of liability post-disaster. So, what is liability? Liability is essentially a state of being responsible for something. This can include an injury, property damage, or monetary loss. In the case of a disaster, it is difficult to find a culprit for the damage that follows such, since we can't hold Mother Nature liable for the damages that they caused. Therefore, at the end of the day, all we could do is hope that no one aggravates the situation, which would make them responsible for further damage, or should I say, liable for further damage. So, if a person is going to be held liable for damage post-disaster, it will most likely be because of negligence. So what is negligence? So the class definition of negligence states that taking reasonable care to avoid foreseeable harm to another, where our conduct causes that harm. For there to be a legal liability, a plaintiff in a suit must be able to prove this duty of care, this breach, this injury, and this causation. And this was retrieved from the class PowerPoint. So in other words, if a public official is negligent with their duties or careless or causes harm that should not occur, the official will be responsible for paying monetary damages to the party that was injured. So essentially what this means is that public officials must aim to avoid causing further damage post-disaster, as it could have legal consequences. So moving forward to how citizens themselves could be held liable post-disaster, here I have presented a few examples to help explain liability. So in the first example, someone in your home is injured after a tree fell on them during a disaster. If the tree was a hazard prior to the disaster, you could be held responsible or liable for the injuries. Ultimately, since the homeowner yourself could have avoided the tree falling with proper care and maintenance, they are held responsible for the incident. So moving forward to the second example, let's say a light post falls on your home during a storm. If evidence of the light post not being properly built is presented in court, the construction company that built the light post could be held liable for the damages. So overall, what I'm trying to show here is that both citizens and corporations can be held responsible for damages after a storm, if the damage could have been avoided or was caused by them. So moving forward, the government could also be held liable in certain circumstances. So federal, state, and local governments all have different ways of assessing liability and determining immunity for the government. So under the federal government, which is the Federal Tort Claims Act, federal officials can be held responsible for negligent conduct that does not involve a discretionary action. Discretionary action being an action that involves a person's judgment or an official's judgment. So this contrasts greatly with the state and local governments. So in state governments, state officials can only be held liable if a state statute allows them to be sued for negligence. So essentially what this means is that state officials have immunity unless otherwise stated by a court or a statute. And this follows on to local government, which is extremely similar and just mirrors the state government. So if a state statute states that state officials cannot be held liable under that statute, the same would apply to local officials. And here are my sources. Thank you and have a pleasant day.